Hi, I'm Harshil, Director of Scientific Development at Seqera. I run a team of biometicians here, and our interest is mostly with Nextflow, NF Core, Seqera platform, and various other tools that we're developing at the company. So I wanted to talk to you today uh, about some of the mission values and core advancements that we're making at Seqera, as well as how it fits into the life sciences ecosystem. And so if we think about software engineering as an example, it's changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And so just to highlight this, we've got a number of points here that show that code generation has become a lot easier now, with the things like AI and LLMs and other models that we've got out there to help with writing code. It's helping efficiencies there. This didn't exist before. Also using source code management with Git and various other tools to version your code, to collaborate on writing code, as well as to review others' code as well, has changed quite dramatically. Containerization has really pushed the way that we think about reproducibility, not only in software engineering, but also in science. If you run your tools in Docker containers, you now don't need to install these tools locally on your HPC or other environments. And part of the problem with that also is that you can't share those tools, or you can't even plug out your HPC and share it with someone else if they want to reproduce the results. And containerization has really changed the way that we go about doing these things. Cloud adoption has grown in recent times. A lot of big pharma, biotech, and other companies are now really using cloud to for all of their analysis, data analysis, storage, compute, and we will be seeing more and more adoption now as we go on. Testing has become quite important to make sure that your code is working, essentially. So GitHub Actions is a good example of this. When you write code, you want to run integration tests to make sure that everything that you're doing isn't breaking your existing code base. And this has become more and more widely used to ensure code quality, but also to have sanity checks when you're developing software. Project management, nowadays, software engineers and others are now using Jira to manage their projects and other tools as well. And what this allows you to do is be a bit more structured in the way that you're developing your code, not only within one team, but also cross-functionally, where you may want to collaborate on features, roadmap, and other tasks with other teams in the company. So why haven't scientists benefited from modern software development tools? This is a question that we keep on asking ourselves, and actually we try to push the boundaries at Seqera to really empower scientists to use these sorts of principles as they're writing their code. And Nextflow really has helped with that adoption and that growth. It was initially founded in 2013 by Paolo and Evan. Nextflow is open source. It will remain open source. Open source and open science is very important to Seqera in general. And so now Nextflow is almost 10 years old. It first started out at the CRG and has now been widely adopted and is the sort of standard workflow language that is used for data analysis. NF Core is a community that started alongside Nextflow very early on, and the main aim of NF Core was to use all of the advantages that you get from writing and running Nextflow pipelines in a community context where we could come together and essentially write a set of best practice pipelines that people can run off the shelf wherever they want, and also tying into some of the software engineering principles I mentioned earlier, where you can embrace the usage of Git and containers, as well as CI/CD, to now also push this adoption within life sciences, so scientists can really start working and collaborating on running these pipelines and developing these pipelines. Seqera was founded a few years later. It's almost, well, it's just over 5 years old now as a company. We've grown quite dramatically over that time. And we have developed a platform called Seqera Platform, which is our licensed product in that time, and added a number of key features that I'll go through with you a bit later on. But in terms of customer base, we have over a dozen of the top 20 pharma. We've got over 100 customers, and we also have growing adoption of Nextflow, as I'll show you in the next slide as well. If we look at the continuum of some of the landmark scientific discoveries that have come over the past 20 years, you can see the Human Genome Project. You can see when NGS sequencing was becoming more popular, as well as protein folding. And these life science advancements also have been mirrored to some extent by advancements in infrastructure and technology. It's become cheaper now to run compute. Chips are getting better day by day. We have more options in terms of where we want to run our compute, as well as store our data. And we're really trying to adopt these principles and practices at Seqera to develop our products as well, to stay at the cutting edge of this. And Nextflow is a great example of this, but we do have other products that we're building and pushing out to really help with scientists focus on the science and not have to worry about the technology and the infrastructure. Nextflow itself has a number of key benefits. It's portable. You write a pipeline once, you do it properly, and then you can run it virtually anywhere, whether that's a laptop, a HPC, or any of the cloud providers. It's reproducible because behind the scenes, it imposes the usage of containers, which means that I can run the same pipeline on my infrastructure, and you can run it on your infrastructure and get the same result by using these containers. That also somewhat contributes to the portability as well, because it makes it easier for you to share these containers. It's scalable, so it manages the dependency graph of your pipeline intrinsically, and it will scale up and down as and how you want in terms of the infrastructure you have, which actually then becomes a limitation. It's not really about how much you can scale, it's more about how much infrastructure you have access to. The adoption of Nextflow has grown since its inception and growth, and we are the creators and the maintainers of Nextflow, and over time that we've seen an exponential growth in its adoption, in its usage across the world in various different settings, whether that's in academia, open source type setting, or also in biotech companies, as well as small and large pharma. And we also have communities that are built around Nextflow, and the key principle again for us is to make and develop Nextflow in the open source layer. So it will always be open source. As I mentioned, it's very important to us as a company to continue with that sort of adoption in an open source sort of setting. If we look at the data analysis lifecycle, you typically will get some data, and then you may want to write some pipelines to analyze that data. You then have to run those pipelines somewhere, whether that's on cloud or on HPC. Those pipelines generate some results that you then need to present and maybe even take further in terms of analysis. If you do want to take it further in terms of analysis, nowadays there are lots of options to do interactive analysis with Jupyter Notebooks, RShiny, and even looking at your variants in IGV. And so what we want to do at Seqera is really to try and tackle each of these different components to make it easier for scientists to, again, focus on the science and not the infrastructure. And so we're working on tools and products that will help scientists be productive throughout this entire life cycle of data analysis. This is what we're building in Seqera Platform. Seqera Platform is essentially the umbrella for all of our different products at the company. So it's the place to run Nextflow. It's intrinsically is able to do various other things that make it a lot easier for you to manage the way that you're running Nextflow in your organization. There's cost benefits, as well as user management, infrastructure management, run reporting and provenance. So there are various other features there that really you wouldn't get out of the box by just running Nextflow via the command line. We have other products too, including Multi-QC, Fusion, and Wave, and I'll go through those in a bit more detail in the following slides. We've developed a product called Data Explorer. what this allows you to do is essentially use your existing credentials to then go and browse and upload and download data directly from within the platform itself. So the way that the platform works is you run your Nextflow pipelines on your infrastructure. So that just it's all hosted directly on your infrastructure and your storage. And this allows you to manage your discounts with your cloud providers or your HPC systems. It allows you to protect your data if that's important to you. Nothing stays within the platform. It essentially is a pane of glass for you to go and run your pipelines on your infrastructure. And so as part of that, it's also important to then give access to your storage to your users in the platform. And so Data Explorer really allows you to go and provide users with the results in terms of where the data exists. Fusion is a product that we've developed to make it a lot easier for you to manage the way that you move data around in the cloud. And so essentially what it allows you to do is almost mimic a shared file system, but in the cloud. So by default, Nextflow in the cloud will copy data from blob storage into the virtual machine where you're running your tasks. This can be quite fragile, especially if you're moving a lot of data around, and it can cause API issues and failures with the native cloud APIs. And so we really wanted to attempt to address that problem. And we've been developing Fusion to allow us now, rather than copying data into the virtual machine, it's almost like mounting data directly into the container from blob storage so that you can go and run these pipelines directly and reduce the overhead in terms of moving data around the cloud. And we've seen some great benefits in terms of throughput, as well as time and cost efficiencies that you get from using Fusion. Wave is a containerization solution that we've developed that allows you to build and deploy containers a lot easier when you're running your Nextflow pipelines. And so a classic example of one of the use cases of Wave is that Nextflow can now build containers directly for you from Conda recipes. If you're using Conda in your pipelines, it's a great resource, Conda, BioConda. What that means is you don't have to deal with the software dependencies if you're using those. And so Nextflow can already use Conda as a solution to install and use software. But now it can also build containers using those Conda declarations directly and on the fly, depending on what your requirements look like. So you don't have to go and manage and build those containers, push them up to your registries. It can also manage access to private registries directly via the platform as well. And so there are a number of advantages of using Wave. And it's growing in terms of adoption also in the open source communities like NF Core. MultiQC is a reporting tool that was developed by Phil Yules, who's also at Seqera, and he wrote it to essentially summarize core QC metrics from some of the most common bioinformatics tools. And what's nice about that is you run an experiment, you might run 10 different tools in your pipeline, and those tools will generate logs, and MultiQC scrapes those logs and renders everything in a nice format for you to then go and QC your experiment and to make sense of what went well and potentially what went wrong. And so we are also actively developing and improving MultiQC support and advancements there. Ultimately, no matter which organization you're in, you will want to save costs and be efficient in the way that you run pipelines. We have an optimization feature in the platform that attempts to be a bit more stringent with the resources that you're requesting when you're running your Nextflow pipelines. What's nice about this is because we know the resources that you're requesting from the pipeline by default, which tend to be quite generous on average, because you don't want the pipeline to fail because it doesn't have enough resources. We also track what is actually used by that pipeline when it's running. And what that allows us to do is then go and train a machine learning model to then go and predict potentially what you should be using in terms of resources. And so this is as part of the platform, it's integrated into the platform and dynamically generates a config file that will allow you to go and run the same pipeline again, but maybe with fewer resources, which ultimately means you save time and you save cost in terms of how efficient you are in running those pipelines. But that isn't the only cost-saving feature that we have in the platform. There are various other features in the platform that really help you in terms of the way that you're optimizing the usage and running of your pipelines, as well as your development overhead. And so, for example, as I mentioned earlier, the Fusion file system allows you to move data around a lot more efficiently to ultimately save your virtual machine time when you're running these pipelines in terms of cost. There are various other features in the platform that also help with how efficient you are in terms of the way that you're using infrastructure and various other tools to really track what you're spending when you're running your Nextflow pipelines and to make more informed decisions. There's also dashboarding features and various other things that we've got in the platform as well to help you be a bit more informed about this. We've built out a feature called Data Studios that allows you to run interactive analysis directly within the platform. And so Nextflow typically takes some sort of input and provides you with an output, but that isn't the end of the data lifecycle as I showed you in the flow earlier. Typically, you want to take the results from your Nextflow pipeline, maybe pull it into a data studio or a virtual environment where you want to then maybe look at UMAP or look at your variance in IGV. And Data Studios is our feature that allows you to do this. What's really nice about this is that you would use your existing credentials for your compute directly to spin up a data studio in your cloud environment, for example, and you can then benefit from using any virtual machine that is available there within the cloud ecosystem, whether that's for GPUs or CPUs, and also in terms of size. If you want a really large virtual machine, you can pick a very large virtual machine. What's going on behind the scenes is that Fusion is actually mounting that data directly from blob storage into the container where this data studio is running. And so, especially when you start dealing with larger and larger files, say, for example, a protein folding database, which typically is about 2 terabytes in size, it makes it a lot more efficient for you to now interact with that data directly from blob storage without needing to download that locally on your laptop and possibly making modifications and re-uploading it to blob storage. And so it's a nice integrated way of loading and managing this data directly via Fusion. You can also share these links to these particular data studios for users in your workspace in the platform and work on this interactive analysis together. There's also checkpointing, which means that the state of the data studio is stored over time, and you can restore that state if you need to then go and spin this up. And this is particularly important for reproducibility. So as I mentioned, the platform allows you to be efficient in terms of how you're spending your costs, but it also can enable you to be more efficient in the way that you're developing your workflows. And so, for example, for across the board for our customers, some have seen benefits in terms of development time and overhead in terms of maybe using NF Core pipelines, which are open source that you can run off the shelf and work on virtually any infrastructure. And this means that they have to, they've spent less time having to develop these pipelines. There are also cost benefits through the features that I mentioned earlier. But in essence, the platform has a number of features to make it more efficient for you to manage the way that you're running your Nextflow pipelines and how you're managing your infrastructure in a more informed way across your organization. That's it from me. Thank you for listening and hope this was useful.